Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. And I am here tonight with Luann Lee, a college funding specialist from Your College Planning Coach. While everybody kind of comes in, we have a few more people in the waiting room. Let me let them in. Okay, good. Everybody is coming in muted. So this is actually a meeting, not a webinar. So you should keep yourself muted, but if by chance you want to say something and you don't want to type it in the chat, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. I'm going to, let's see, turn on captions so people can read anything we say. And I'm also going to put this on Facebook if anybody there wants to watch. And while I do that, Luann, if you just want to give a little background about yourself and what we're really going to do tonight, that, you know, in terms of maybe looking over some slides and then asking questions. And while we do these few quick things, if you can put in the chat, most people tonight, I assume, are parents of a high school senior or maybe an existing college student. Have you done your FAFSA yet? How'd it go? And then we know, basically, we're going to answer a lot of questions tonight.
Well, good evening, everybody. And this is part 2 today.
Right.
And I see we have a lot more folks coming in this evening than we did at lunchtime today. So probably a lot of questions about the FAFSA, and we may go ahead and answer some of your questions beforehand. So you know, bear with us. But I'm based in Warrenton, Virginia, in close to DC, and my practice is called Your College Planning Coach. So I've been in this world for about 20 years now. Started in financial planning. And have decided years ago that I could help more families prepare for their retirement by helping them pay less for college. And it would be more fun than trying to pick stock options. So, but I think I just transferred one headache for a larger one that is called Department of Ed and FAFSA. So Debbie, you wanna just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, what we thought, I mean, honestly, tonight is kind of informal. We did something like this a few days after the FAFSA opened at the beginning of January. We are calling this a AUA, Ask Us Anything. And we're just going to go through a few slides to highlight what we think are some of the more important things that people should know about the FAFSA changes. And then I'm just going to read through the chat and try and pick up some, you know, questions that are hitting on some main points. And we'll just try and get through as much as we can in the hour. Okay.
Do you want me to go with the slides, Debbie, and you watch the chat?
That'd be great. Yes, you can do that.
So somebody asked today, what does the SAI mean? And so we probably have a few veterans on this evening with students that they've done FAFSAs before. You've already got a child in college. And so the calculation, you know, as much as everybody hated EFC, expected family contribution, and thought, oh, it's so confusing, the SAI is turning out to be just as confusing because the calculation is the same. You take the cost of attendance of the school minus the SAI, Student Aid Index, and then that equals the, you know, the financial need or the gap. And so a little bit different with the SAI, the calculation can actually go to a negative 1,500. So what that does is that's, you know, for families that are very low income, and I'm talking like less than 30,000 adjusted gross income. So it lets the schools know that this is a family that really needs a lot of help. And so are we going to be able to help them with institutional aid? And again, that just means has your student chosen schools that are going to meet 100% of that need that you have? Because not all schools are going to meet that need. And some, if they do meet 100%, but maybe 80% is going to be in loans and 20% in grants or vice versa. So that's the secret sauce that most families need to be aware of. I always had a slide. If my EFC is 0, does that mean I go to college for free? We're going to have to replace that with, if my SAI is 0, am I going to go to college for free? So one thing
and if my SAI is negative, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, it means that you're going to get the full Pell Grant, which is $7,395 this year. So if your SAI is a negative 1,500 to a 0, you'll qualify for that $7,395. If it starts going up, so like say your SAI is 3,000, then that means that it's the difference between the $7,395 minus the 3,000. That's what you should qualify for in a Pell Grant. So then once your Pell Grant, or once your SAI number is above that $7,395, then you're not going to qualify for Pell Grant. But, it depends on the school, you might qualify for institutional aid. So it's kind of almost as murky as what the EFC was in the past. Debbie, you want to go to the next? Okay, so there were a number of changes to the questions on the FAFSA. They really reduced the number of questions that were asked in the past. So honestly, it's pretty easy to do if you follow the directions, watch the tutorials, and go step by step. Although, and I know that some of you did that and still had errors. It's just the glitch that we know of this soft launch.
And I'm already seeing a fair number of people saying this, and people said it this morning, that they feel like they did everything right. And their student entered the information, they entered the information, and it's still not giving them back an SAI, or it's saying still needs to be processed.
Well, the reason that it still everyone's FAFSA is in process. Nothing has been transmitted from the Department of Ed.
But some people admittedly have gotten an actual SAI number, so.
So yes, but that's a glitch as well. So at the beginning, they said that no one will receive an SAI number until everything has been processed by FAFSA to the colleges. And then once the schools have processed your FAFSA, the student was going to get their what used to be the student aid report, their summary. Well, all of a sudden, people are getting an SAI figure, not people, but the student gets an email. Congratulations, Debbie. Here's your, you completed your FAFSA, and your parents completed as well. It's been submitted, and you had an SAI number. Then all of a sudden, those were going away. Nobody was receiving any. Or, we're unable to calculate your SAI right now, or, that and a bazillion other messages. It's just the glitches that are inherent in the system. So even those that have received an SAI number, they're saying that they might not be correct. So, we won't really know until after everything has been processed. So, for some of you old timers that, saw the selective service question and such, a lot of those questions have been removed, although they're still asking about applicants' sex and race. You just don't have to answer it, which is, They said that they removed it, but it's still there, and just telling you it's, if you prefer to answer it or not. Go ahead, Debbie.
Oh, I saw it went to the next page.
Oh, I'm not seeing it.
Oh, what's different?
Oh, sorry. It's been a long day. So, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, they never asked me any questions about my income or my assets. When you log in, initially your student completes it, and then you, the parent, go in to complete it. That first screen, you're actually giving permission to transfer your IRS 1040 over to FAFSA. You're not going to see any questions in regards to anything related to your tax return unless you're somebody that will have to manually input. So if you've had you had an amended tax return that was later in the year, or maybe you've had tax fraud and you're unable to electronically submit your tax return. So there's a few instances. A divorced or separated family that they are filed their 2022 tax return as married filing jointly, and now they're divorced or separated. If you answer those questions correctly, then it will come up and you'll input manually your information. If the custodial parent for the FAFSA is you're going to just remove your ex-spouse's tax information from the 1040. You'll just input your earnings. And somebody asked today, well, how do we figure out the rest of it? Well, talk to an accountant or a tax preparer, CPA, to get those calculations. I'm not going to give you tax advice.
So Luann, along the same lines, if people are seeing a FAFSA that is asking to enter in all that information, just beware that you may have started the 2023-2024 FAFSA and not the correct FAFSA.
Yes. So you're logging into 24-25, and you're going to use the 22 tax return. And I know somebody's going to ask, well, my income has changed dramatically, or my circumstances have changed dramatically. What do I do? Do I wait until my 23 taxes are done? No, you can only file with your 22 tax return, but you want to get your 23 taxes done as soon as possible, and then be prepared for the schools that your student is applying to. They'll have either special circumstances form or professional judgment, or they all call them something different. And then you can submit an appeal to explain what has happened. Now, what's different this year than in the past, there is a question that asks, have your circumstances changed? Maybe a job loss or medical expenses or such. You can check yes. You can't explain like you can explain on the CSS profile, but at least it's in the system. And so it's not something that won't be unexpected. And also too, on the prior screen, where it said it's not going to take into consideration the amount of children in college anymore, they do ask how many are in college. So if you're filing for your high school senior and you already have a college freshman, you'll have 2 in college at the start of the fall of 2024. So they still ask, because there are going to be some schools that will take into consideration that you have more than one student in college. It's not going to be completely cut across the board that they just won't take that into consideration. It's going to be a case by case scenario with the colleges, because quite honestly, they don't want students that are already on their campuses to leave. They want your students to stay. So there might be some, some grandfathering, in a sense, to make sure that those students are going to stay on campus. Now, not everybody is going to be as cooperative in that regard. And if you do have students that are already on campus, and let's just say that you already have 2 or 3 kids that are in college, reach out to those schools and ask them, now, how are you going to handle, are you going to change the grants that my children have gotten in the past? Or can we still expect, a similar award? You want to know that now, in the event that you might have to make some pretty drastic changes, either financial changes or maybe even students having to transfer out of schools.
So Luann, there's a quick question about the negative 1,500 SAI. Do you know how that applies to students going into grad school?
So grad school students do not get Pell Grants.
Right, that's why they're asking. So it just doesn't apply in the same way.
It truly doesn't apply. And the changes to the income protection allowance, we might as well address that right now. So initially, that was a big fail, and it was going to make a big difference too, like an increase of $4,000 to $10,000 for some families with a change because of the rampant inflation that we've had over the last few years. But they didn't get those calculations finished in time for this soft launch. So at first they said, well, we'll just have to make sure that it's included in 25, 26. And there was quite an uproar because, we're talking about millions of dollars of lost aid for families. And so they've announced that they are going to finish that calculation. So right now we're waiting to find out what's going to happen. Is the delay going to, right now they had said that they would transfer the FAFSA data to the colleges at the end of January, the end of the soft launch.
They said this before they announced that there was an issue with the income protection and that they were going to make that correction.
Correct. So then they said, well, we can do one of two things. We can still transfer as we said we would. And then once we've finished this calculation, we'll get that information to the school, and then they can recalculate. And so that puts the burden on the colleges big time. So I'm hoping for the sake of the financial aid offices at the colleges that I know that everybody wants this information transferred because they're just, they're so stressed out and such. But the reality is that if it does transfer, you get an SAI number and then the school has to redo it. You're not going to get the right information anyways. So we're waiting to see if this delay of transferring to the schools is going to extend beyond the end of the month. And somebody asked, what is the income protection allowance? It just means that, depending
it's a chart, just so you know, it's like a chart, but go ahead, Lynn.
And, you have, whether you're single or married, filing jointly, and the age of the oldest parent, there's going to be an income protection allowance. So let's just say it was $20,000. I'm just throwing numbers out here. So that means that the first $20,000 of your income is not going to be assessed for SAI or for FAFSA. Anything beyond that will then be assessed. Same thing with asset protection allowance. They brought the asset protection allowance back. It's minuscule. It really isn't a whole heck of a lot. So whatever that allowance is, they won't be assessing your monies until anything beyond that protection allowance.
So Luann, it'd be helpful. I don't even think I have another slide. Oh, I do. Sorry. But actually, before you do that slide, because this is a good question, and I think we've had it before, do you want to talk through what you believe the best practice is and for how to start the FAFSA and kind of like the sequence of how to do it? Because a lot of people have asked, and there's a person here, maybe they listened to us before, but they're kind of parroting what you had suggested. And so I think it would be good for everybody to hear.
Right. And, I'm a rule follower. So, with all the tutorials and whatnot that I've watched, they said, do the students FAFSA first, or because it is the students FAFSA. So you log in with the student's FSA ID, asks, they're going to have asked the same question. Do you authorize the IRS to transfer your information? Doesn't matter that they haven't filed a tax return yet. They're still going to answer that. And most everybody isn't even reading that page, so they don't even know that they've done it. But you go ahead and continue. They're going to invite their contributors. So their contributor is if your mom and dad are married, living in the same household, married, filing jointly, they're both contributors. What they went on to say is, that every contributor needs an FSA ID. But then, they go on to say, but if you're married filing jointly, only one parent actually needs the FSA ID to electronically sign the FAFSA. So you're still going to invite both parents, but only one parent, the parent that has the FSA ID, is the parent that's going to sign FAFSA. So what has worked for me, we do the student portion first, there's more questions on the student's portion than there is on the parents' portion, because they have to fill out their colleges, asking, what high school and all of that information. They're asking, what do they have in their checking and savings and investments and such. But once the student has completed their portion and signed, it's going to, they're going to sign it. It's going to say, you're finished. You as the parent, because hopefully you're doing this together instead of letting your student do this on their own, because that's where a lot of errors have occurred. But so you're going to log out of the student's account, and then the screen just comes back up with their username and password. You delete that, input the parent's username and password, and then it will say, check my activities. Click on that, and it says you have been invited. Do you wish to help your, student do their FAFSA? And then you just complete what you hopefully had done with your student. You're not going to see any information about your tax return. Some of you that if your income is, say, less than 60,000 adjusted gross income, and you've got several children in your family, you may not even have to answer any asset questions. So if you don't have any of the schedules, schedule 1, 2, 3, or schedules A through H on your 1040, then you just
Oop, Luann, you're cutting out a little bit.
if you're under 60,000, and let's just say that you have a Schedule C because you have a business. If you earned less than $10,000 with your business, that will trigger.
Luann, if you can hear me, I think you should shut off your video. I know sometimes you have problems with the internet, and I think we'll hear you better. I think let's give Luann 2 minutes. She probably has to rejoin.
I'm back.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Zoom kicked me out.
Okay.
So, so some of you aren't even going to see any asset questions. And I know that there was a big to-do about the free lunch, or, the federal means tested questions. If you're low income and you qualified for free lunch, not just through COVID, then yes, answer that question. But if your school is still giving free lunches and your AGI is 175,000, don't answer yes to that question, because it's just going to trigger that something's wrong and you're not going to be able to finish your FAFSA. So no one's FAFSA has processed, but those that have errors that can't even go forward, they're going to have to wait until the Department of Ed processes, and then you're going to have to go in and make corrections. And some of those corrections you're not going to be able to make by yourself, and you'll have to stay on hold with either FAFSA or with the financial aid offices at the colleges.
So Luann, I'm going to stop sharing the slides and start going through some of the questions, since we're like about halfway through. Yep. There's a good question here about what are the circumstances that you know of where a family might not be able to use the IRS retrieval tool, and they might have to do something more manual. For example, if somebody owning a small business, can they still use the IRS retrieval tool?
So the data retrieval tool is no longer in existence. So it's called the DDX exchange or something like that. But so even if you have a small business, I've done a few FAFSAs with families that are business owners, and it all just transferred over. So, but if there's something that triggers it that you're going to have to manually input, it will come up and you'll have the screens, and you're just going to follow the line items. It'll tell you which line item to, your adjusted gross income is line 11. Your, how much did you pay in tax? That's line 22. Just follow the directions. Don't overthink it. Just if it tells you what line item, that's the only one that they want. They don't want line 24. They don't want line 37. They don't want you to go over to your Schedule C or such. Just follow the directions.
I'm seeing this comment a lot. We saw it this morning a lot. I'm just going to repeat it. And that people who have multiple students who are saying they completed the FAFSA fine with their first student, but it seems like the second student, they have a glitch, or they're getting, it's not really working. again, I don't know for sure, but Luann and I were talking earlier. You mentioned, Luann, you were kind of crossing your fingers, working with somebody, going in and out, going in and out. And my guess is that there is probably some system problem with the caching of the system that has to do with when it pulls multiple times at the same account. And in the case where it's a parent with multiple students, it might be when they go in on that second account. And if you've done it kind of pretty close to the first student, there might be an issue about pulling that parent information again. I'm hypothesizing, but it seems to be a pretty frequent comment that we're seeing over and over again.
Yeah, and I've done several families with multiple students, and I haven't had any issues. So sometimes it could be the timing. I like, I would not do a FAFSA at this time of day. I have not. I've done them all during the day, or maybe on a Sunday morning when it wasn't down for maintenance, but I don't do it at night. I just haven't jinxed myself. I haven't wanted to be when everybody else was on the platform, and haven't had any problems. But I systematically did one at a time. One student did the parent. Now we're going to log back in, do the second student, now do the parent again. And I do know that there's supposed to be some way that you can connect it so you don't have to redo the parent a second time. I don't trust it, so I didn't do it. So I can't really tell you how it works, because I just refused to do anything that was going to give me an opportunity of having a glitch.
So there's a question, a very fair question about deadlines. And so why don't we kind of talk about if your college is still saying like the deadline for FAFSA for them could have been, we heard that some colleges were still saying it was January 15th. Some colleges still saying February 1st. What do you think about that? And then the second is, any thoughts on all these delays and how it might impact the decision day deadline of May 1st?
So, the colleges are in the same situation as you are. They haven't received anything. They know that you can't process anything. So I find it very suspect that any college is going to, say, oh, well, we need a screenshot that you did it on such and such a time or such, or, I would appeal that tremendously, because this is out of everyone's control. Same thing with third-party scholarships, state grants and state aid. Everybody knows what's going on. So if it helps and makes you feel better, contact the financial aid office at the schools that you're concerned about and ask. And I would dare say 99.9% of them have, they've extended their dates out big time. And there hasn't been any formal decision for, May 1st decision day to change. But they're all, everybody's wondering, well, if they keep delaying the college's ability to get these financial aid offers out, are we going to have, we're not going to have enough time to make decisions. So I don't know, my crystal ball is a bit cloudy, but I would dare say that, we might be looking at a change in a May 1st decision, maybe the 15th or maybe even June 1st. We're in uncharted territory here. This has never happened. Even COVID, with the challenges that we had that first year of COVID, there were a lot of schools that changed their dates, but it was very individual. It wasn't, the whole process. We'll find out pretty soon, I think, if they're going to continue to delay. And just for those of you to also, that you're very stressed about this, try to have some patience. But the majority of you are not going to get your financial aid award, your true full offering. It typically doesn't go out until March or April anyways. So, that's just how it always has been. There's schools that they just close their regular decision deadline date. And some of them still haven't even had that date. So it's not unheard of. I need to make a decision. This is not a process for the weak of heart. You just have to try to do the best that you can to do your net price calculators, or however you've determined why did you apply to these schools in the first place. You hopefully had some knowledge of whether this was going to be close to being affordable or not. But if you're waiting for those great big old, full ride scholarships and such, a lot of you are going to be sorely disappointed.
So there's a good question about if a family's income is too high to receive Pell Grant, which I would imagine, a fair number of people on this call fall into that situation. Should the student still even bother filling out the FAFSA?
Oh my gosh, yes. All right, so I'll share this. I worked with a parent just over a week ago. 185,000 adjusted gross income. When I first met them, they were not going to bother filing the FAFSA because everybody told them, why should you bother? You're not going to get anything. And they're applying to also CSS profile schools. Why should you bother? You're not going to get anything. Well, they did, and they got a substantial institutional grant.
And let me just highlight, Luann, if it's okay. My guess is, and I don't know this family, but the reason why they got whatever money they got is because they were also strategic about where they applied, where their student applied to college. But then now continue your story.
Yes. So it's got a lot to do with the college list.
So it wasn't just the FAFSA. It was the fact that they filled out the FAFSA and they were smart about where they applied.
No, this has got nothing to do with the FAFSA. It's the CSS profile.
Okay.
So the CSS profile does a deeper dive into your finances than the FAFSA does. So for those of you that have applied to schools and you've submitted a CSS profile, they know what you're going to qualify for from filing the FAFSA, whether you're going to qualify for a Pell Grant or not, but it's the institutional aid that they're giving. So this particular family, the award letter that they received, it didn't have anything on it as far as Pell Grant or the subsidized or unsubsidized loans, but it had a really nice institutional grant. It's not merit, it was grants. So yes, file, especially for the first year. I don't care if you make Bill Gates kind of income. File the FAFSA, file the CSS profile. You might not get any grants from the government, but it's, depending on the stats of your student and such. And for this particular family, the student had great stats. We submitted, a very nice appeal from a standpoint of, why there wasn't a lot of asset, but there was good income. It all helps, all these little pieces of that puzzle. So, do file.
So kind of an add-on to this is somebody's asking, well, if, to your point, if my student applied to a school that asked for the CSS profile, do I still need to file the FAFSA? And the reason why you're right, you want to file FAFSA regardless is because it's the only way you need to file a FAFSA to get access to any student loans. And student loans that are only for your student, which are the direct federal student loans, will always be at the lowest interest rate. That's a kind of a whole nother session that we talk about when we talk about student loans, but the only way your student will get access to those student loans is through a FAFSA, even if they receive nothing else from the college. And the only way you as a parent, if you choose to use a Parent Plus loan to get access to that money, is through the FAFSA. So those are the other kind of quick reasons why you should fill out the FAFSA, even if your school has a is asking for the CSS profile, and even if you know you may not get any money from the school or the government. If you want to borrow, you need to fill out a FAFSA.
And to find out if your school uses a CSS profile, just go to the collegeboard.org under CSS profile schools and see if the schools, any of the schools that your student is applying to, use the CSS profile.
So what about if people think they made a mistake on the FAFSA? So one person is saying our application is submitted, but it's missing a signature. How do we fix it? So how are people going to fix any mistakes that they think they made?
So you're going to have to wait until it processes, and then you can go back in and do the signature. That should be something that you can just log back in to do. I'm not really sure yet because we haven't done one yet, but you should be able to correct that on your own. There's going to be some things that you can correct on your own and other things that will have to be corrected through the financial aid department at the colleges. Sometimes FAFSA might be able to, like if you're having a problem with registering you messed up the FSA ID and confused it with your student or social or date of birth, or spelled your kid's name wrong or used their nickname or such. Some of those things you can FAFSA, the FAFSA hotline is what I call it. They can help you with those.
So there's a few questions about if somebody has not filled out their FAFSA yet, kind of hearing all of this, should they wait a little bit longer to see if the glitches subside some more? I mean, or maybe they just need to go with the advice, which I think is great, what you've offered, to find a time where we think it's like very low traffic or as low traffic as possible on the site, and be methodical about how they enter the information.
So for those of you that you are expecting to qualify for a Pell Grant, so adjusted gross income under 60,000, especially under 30,000. You may even, some of you are going to qualify for your state grants. Go to your state Department of Education and find out what the AGI requirements are for state grants. Those of you want to get it filed so that when it does process, you're in the system. For those of you that without a shadow of a doubt, you're not going to qualify for a Pell Grant, you're not going to, you're a FAFSA only school, it's not a CSS profile where they give institutional aid or such, and but you just want to have it on record because your students are going to use the student loans, or you may be using the Parent Plus loans. You can wait a little bit longer if you feel more comfortable waiting until it's processed. I think it's pretty okay to do now. It's not like the first couple of weeks where it was only open like an hour a day and they were constantly going down. But don't rush through it. Don't, pay attention. And if you haven't, they have the tutorials on the first 3 pages. Some of them are only like 4 or 5 minutes. Take the time and go through those tutorials. It'll walk you through what you should be doing.
Okay, we got a question about assets. 529s. You want to talk about how they should be reported, what the change has been? I think there's not many good things about what's changed about the FAFSA, but I do think this is one of the better changes that have happened.
Yeah. So let's say you've got 3 kids and each one has a 529 plan. And the 2 younger kids are not in college yet. Or let's say all 3 are in college. You only have to use or disclose the asset. The 529 is a parent asset. It's a parent investment. But you only have to disclose the balance of the student who you're filing the FAFSA for. So if you've got 3 accounts, you only just use the one for each of the FAFSA accounts. And another great change in regards to 529 plans is, in the past, if a grandparent had a 529, or if they were gifting monies or such, that was all assessed as income to the student the following year. And that's no longer a case. It's not going to show up at all. So that's a bonus. And just in case, if you are divorced and your ex is not the custodial parent for the FAFSA, and they are the owner of the 529, that 529 does not get disclosed under your assets as the custodial FAFSA parent. And while we're talking divorce, if you received child support, that is no longer assessed as income, it's assessed as an asset.
A question about if the student didn't,
but it's not too long.
oops.
Hey.
If the student didn't file taxes in the prior year, how does that impact the FAFSA?
So I'm thinking they didn't file taxes
because they weren't employed. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, if they weren't employed and they didn't earn any income, it doesn't matter. They're still going to sign. Yes, right. I authorize the IRS to transfer. There's nothing to transfer. Sometimes they ask for tax transcripts in the old days, and a student had sometimes had to submit a non-filer tax transcript just for the IRS to confirm that they didn't earn any income. So they just don't trust us.
But we're supposed to trust them. I don't know if you have any advice for this person who said that they tried to create a parent, account linked to their social security number, but the studentaid.gov site is saying that an account already exists with that social security number. They've said that they've never created an account, or to their memory. Any ideas about how they can go about trying to recover, I guess, their login or what they should do?
I mean, if you think back and you truly have never been in the federal aid system back when you were in college with your social security number and such, then you're going to have to get a hold of FAFSA to there might be some some fraud or something going on.
That's what I was thinking.
But sometimes people, they forget, or they've transposed a number, or maybe the name that you're using is not the same name that Social Security has for you, especially for people that have gotten married and divorced and remarried again. And, I had a client that did that a few years ago, and it was interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about number of colleges that you can put on the list for FAFSA, what that number is now, and then if you need to add more colleges to that list, whether or not you filled it up initially, like how do you go about adding more colleges to the FAFSA list?
So now they used to be 10, now it's 20. So most students should be able to file, and I'm just going to tell you, if somebody, contacted me, oh, I was just trying to see if it worked, so I only put one school and then submitted, and now I can't go back and put the rest in. No, you can't, because you can't go in and make a correction. So if you haven't filed yet, put all of the schools that are on your students list, whether they've applied to the school
Because
yet.
there's no harm if if the school ends up getting the information and your student doesn't apply.
Just sits out there in limbo. And, if they never receive an application, there's nothing to connect to it. But if you have more than 20 schools, say like, musical theater kids end up applying to a lot of schools, what you're going to have to do is wait until everything processes, and then you can go in and, so in the past, you could delete some of the schools on your list that have already been processed and received your FAFSA. I don't know that I would trust that this year. So what you can do is you have a DRN, data retrieval number, on the upper right-hand corner of the FAFSA, and when you file. And so you can always call FAFSA and ask them to add another school, or you can call the school in question and say, give them your DRN number, and they'll add your FAFSA to their records.
Luann, I don't know if you've heard of this problem where the student entered and created, entering their information first, and their parent is claiming that the student didn't get a screen to invite the parent.
Then the student answered the question correctly when it asks, will your parent cooperate and help you file this FAFSA? It's like a double negative in the question. And especially if students are doing this on their own, which they should not be, they're answering it incorrectly.
Because they're not really understanding the question.
Understanding it. And so now it's kicked them into, okay, your parents aren't going to help you with this. So that's why there is no parent invite. And the way to correct that is to wait until things process, and you'll have to go and contact FAFSA to get that corrected.
That example is the best reason why the parent and the student should somehow do it together. Even though there's a parent who said to me, well, my student's in a different state, well, get on FaceTime or Zoom and do it with them.
There's 307 participants on here tonight. I think most of them are parents.
And if you can get on this Zoom, you can get on a Zoom with your student.
Well, we're all confused. So why would we think our students would not be?
Okay. Question. Okay. Are custodial checking and savings account considered a parent or student asset?
I'm taking that to mean that your name is on there because the student was underage. If it's the student's account, it's a student asset. It's pretty simple. Whether that's your asset or if it's the student's. And if you have custodial accounts for your younger children, you don't have to include those.
But talk about the situation, because it's always asked a lot about accounts where you might be on the account with an elder parent.
Right. So it depends then on how the account was set up. If your Social Security number is on that account as a co-owner, then yes, that is going to be assessed. So a way to get around it is just get a power of attorney so that you can sign in the event of an emergency.
Can you give some quick directions to the parents who don't have a Social Security number?
So you can you can put all zeros where the social security number would be, but because of the soft launch and such, you're not going to be able to complete it without talking to somebody at FAFSA. And it's so difficult to get through to them that you might have to wait until everything gets processed.
Excuse me, can somebody mention something about parents without a social security number, because we have been unable and nobody's saying anything on how to fix or address the problem?
We just answered it.
I know, maybe you can just say it again, Luann.
All you can do is typically you put zeros where the numbers would go for the social security number. But because of the soft launch, it probably is not going to process, and you'll have to wait until
the zeros was for the solution for last year. This year I was made a manual verification, and I have a working FSA ID. Me and my wife made the FSA ID without a social security number and without inputting zeros, but the system does not let us input any data into the form. And that is mentioned on the FAFSA problems page, but that's started since January 4, and we're waiting and waiting, and nobody is addressing that problem.
You have to wait until the FAFSA has been processed after the month of January.
And when you say process, it really means when the FAFSA information is being sent to the colleges.
The colleges. So there's nothing that you can do with that right now.
So basically we have to wait for everybody else to turn their FAFSA in to be able to start ours.
No, it's really, you're waiting for the government to kind of fix the issues that they're dealing with so that they can pass the information to whatever information they have of people who have already submitted. They need to process it and send it to colleges. Once the colleges have it, I think you'll be dealing with the colleges about entering in your information. So to confirm that, you might want to call up one of the colleges that your student is applying to and just ask them if that's the process that they're going to be working with. But it's all the colleges are waiting to get the information from the government. So that's what you're unfortunately also waiting for. Okay. Can somebody start an application if they're a junior in high school?
No, I mean, there's no reason to that. And why would you put yourself through that? For one, you can go to one of the, the calculators. There's a calculator on the FAFSA or the studentaid.gov site if you want to try to get an estimate. But no, you don't want to mess yourself up and try to log in right now.
And somebody's asking, and I can't even remember what you might have said. They said, can you please recap what you said about the adjusted gross income with regards to Schedule A through H and C? Were you just talking about where you pull the information from?
Oh, so I think what they're talking about is there are going to be situations where if your income, your AGI is less than 60,000, now just because it's 60,000 and maybe you have one child, you're probably going to have to disclose your assets. But if it's much less than 60 and say you've got 4 in your family or such, your AGI could be low enough that you don't have to disclose assets, as long as you also don't have any of the schedules in your tax return, like Schedule 1, 2, 3, or Schedules A through H. Now, if you have a federal means tested benefit, like someone in your household has Medicaid, or you qualified for free lunch, or food stamps or SNAP or such, then that is an automatic qualifier for not having to disclose assets.
Can you talk a little bit about appealing? What has changed this year versus last year in terms about being able to appeal? When do you, I mean, and we can talk about how we might do a session on that, but it'll probably be, we got to make sure that the information gets to the colleges. It'll probably be another month before it's even worthwhile to talk about appeals, but just give people a heads up about what appealing means and what's changed from as part of the new FAFSA
Sure.
Act.
So in the past, there were a lot of colleges that they just didn't accept appeals.
So the college had the right to say, I'm not letting you appeal.
We don't appeal. Now they have to. So they at least have to, look at it and consider it and give you an answer. So it's doesn't mean that you're going to get the answer that you want. So you have to, if you are going to appeal, there's got to be a strong reason for it. If you just lost your job today and you're going to submit an appeal in 2 months, they're not going to take that into consideration. But if you lost your job and you still are not working 6 months later, then that can be some consideration would be taken, maybe some grant money or additional loans or who knows what. But it has to be within reason. If your income changed substantially from what it was in 22 and in 23, then again, you want to get your taxes done as soon as possible so that you've got the documentation. Or if you've had horrible medical expenses or a death in the family or such, just get your documentation in order to be able to follow up with that appeal to give you the best opportunity. And everybody always says, well, the student should be doing this, or can the parent do it? If you're trying to appeal for financial aid because of especially circumstances that have happened to your family, it's fine for the parent to do this. If you're trying to appeal for more merit, then that needs to come from the student, and to show maybe they finished some project or they had better grades or whatever the case is, and why that school is their number one and that sort of thing. But merit needs to come from the student, but financial need can come from the parent request.
So there's a really good question about why does a college need the FAFSA before they can decide and send out decisions about acceptances or rejections?
Say that again.
Why does a college need a FAFSA before they provide students with whether or not a student has been accepted or rejected?
They don't need the FAFSA for that.
Well, some schools may, but some schools that are not need blind may, so maybe kind of talk about if schools are purely looking at a student's academic profile to make a decision about whether or not they're accepted, versus some schools that are looking at both academically and financially.
Right. So that goes into enrollment management, which is the behind the scenes that none of us ever see. And you got to look at colleges are like a business. They have to pay their bills just like we do. So they can't all just give. They're looking for, they've got a bottom line, and they know how many how many students that they can take on to give grants to. They know how many students that they're going to need to full pay to to make sure that the lights stay on. So sometimes it boils down to, well, we've got 24 applicants here, and they're all virtually the same grades, same scores, same extracurriculars, wonderful essays, but we've really given out all of the money that we can. This particular student needs full need, and this one is a full pay. That's going to be a deciding factor in some schools, unless they're completely need blind. But you don't have to file a FAFSA in order for the school to decide whether they're going to accept you or not. If you don't file a FAFSA or a CSS profile, you're just telling the school, I'm willing to pay full pay. So,
That's true. I was reading the question kind of differently, but as you just said, true. In theory,
Yeah.
as a student, as a family, your student doesn't have to fill out any of these financial aid forms, but what you are implicitly telling the college is, if they accept you, you are going to pay whatever the tuition or, the bill comes in at. You're not, going to get any grants from them or merit scholarships or any sort of aid.
Now, Debbie,
That's
so-
true. That's true. Go ahead.
so, merit is on the merit of the student.
Right. They might give you merit. Sorry,
Right.
I should correct that. But what
Yeah.
they are saying is that you're willing to potentially pay full price without any additional need-based aid. So,
Mhm.
so you don't have to fill out these forms, but the reason why the college is asking for these forms before making these decisions is exactly what Luann is saying, because some schools need to look at, it's their revenue, and they need to understand if it comes down to looking at different students, they may choose a student who they know can financially cover more of the bill, because as a school, they don't have enough money to give to all the students that might be worthy to get in academically.
And they want your student to stay at that school. So they're also looking at, is this family going to be able to afford to keep the student here? It doesn't look good that they've got students that are constantly leaving because of financial reasons.
Okay. So this is a repeat, but there's a few questions here about the CSS profile, and some people are confused. I didn't know I had to fill out the CSS profile. So for which schools would they need to fill out the CSS profile?
So there's close to 400 schools. Some of them, the selective Ivy type schools, although Princeton doesn't use the CSS profile, they have their own profile form in a sense. But there's some of the state Ivies like UVA and William and Mary and University of Michigan. And, so you just have to, again, go to collegeboard.org, or, you can just Google is your friend, and just Google in CSS profile schools 2024. And it will give you the link. It goes straight to the CSS profile page, and you'll see the schools, the list. It's in alphabetical order. But just be aware that there's also some schools will, there's a couple of schools on there that they don't require a CSS from domestic students in the US, but they do require an international student. So, you want to just take your time and make sure that if a school does not ask for the CSS profile, they just don't, you can't just go in and do a CSS profile because you think that that's going to put me in a better position. It's only if the school is asking for it.
And somebody's asking, is the CSS profile separate from the FAFSA? There's no connection. There are
None.
different systems. So all these glitches that we're talking about do not pertain to submitting and getting your CSS profile filed.
Yeah, CSS profile opened up on October 1st. And CSS stands for College Scholarship Search. And it's for those schools that use it, they typically have endowment funds that they're giving of their own institutional aid. So they are going to ask a very detailed financial questions. They're asking about your retirement and your equity in your home, and sometimes, what's the lease payment or payment on your car, and when was the last time that you purchased a car? Those are college specific questions. Not every school is going to ask that, but they can ask whatever they want. They're giving their money. It's not government money.
I honestly, I can't remember if you answered this, but I know we talked about 529s. Can you talk about a 529 that a grandparent might have?
That's wonderful. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't show up. You don't include it on the FAFSA, and it no longer shows up anywhere. So it's a wonderful gift.
Meaning what Luann is saying doesn't show up anywhere, meaning when you take out distributions from the 529 to pay for college in the past, that would actually show up on your students next year, the next year's financial aid form, but now it won't show up anywhere. It won't be held against them.
Right. And it's not just 529s either. If your grandparent wants to give $20,000 in cash, that is going to go towards college. The student, doesn't have to report that as income the following year on the FAFSA. Now, if that's sitting in their savings account when you go to file the FAFSA, then that's going to count as an asset. So, you just want to make sure that if the grandparents are going to give something to help pay for college, that it's not sitting in the student or the parent's account when it comes time to file the FAFSA or the CSS. But the CSS profile will ask for the 529 accounts of all of your children. That will count as a parent investment. Whereas with the FAFSA, it's just one student, the student that you're filing for.
Okay, what is the income threshold max where it doesn't make sense to use FAFSA?
There isn't any. A couple years ago, I had a family, very financially
Your sugar.
seven-figure income.
What?
But a couple of the schools that their child was applying to, they required the FAFSA in order to receive the merit scholarship. So they did the FAFSA so that, their daughter could have that pat on the back. Oh, look, this school is offering me a scholarship.
How about, Luann, talk a little bit about state funds and how it relates to FAFSA. Again, kind of what the predicament that some states are in that, that families had to fill out the FAFSA in order to get state funds, and what's happening this year.
So in the past, when you completed the FAFSA, there were states that connected to the state education grants, the FAFSA connected to it. So it was an easy, seamless transition. And I don't believe that there is one state that is connected right now. So I went to the state of New York, and on their website, it specifically states, do not wait to file the FAFSA, fill out your what is it, TAG, I think, or TAP grant
TAP, yeah.
application now. And same thing for California. So the other states that, if you are, that your state gives grant money, and that grant money is the grant money that is kind of first come, first serve. You want to reach out and find out what do they require so that you don't miss out on it.
So we talked a little bit about custodial accounts before, but what if, I guess these accounts are technically UGMAs or UTMAs. What should,
Oh, if it's an UGMA or an UTMA, that's a student account. So that's a student asset. Always has been.
okay, just seeing any questions that we haven't answered. My student is a senior in high school. She applied to 20 colleges, but she will be taking a gap year before starting college. Do we still need to fill out the FAFSA for 24-25? I think you do, because
Well, yeah.
if you're basing the gap year on the fact that she's going to get a decision this year and then deferring that decision, you need to fill out the FAFSA for the 24-25 year because it relates to this application season. If we're
Right.
saying she's going to take a gap year and not apply this year, then you can wait. But if she sent in applications now, then you need to fill out the FAFSA for this year.
Right, because they may be offering some institutional money, and if they allow her to take a gap year, you need to ask, will that same award be valid when she comes back the following year?
Okay, let's end on this question. This will be, something that you could just share your thoughts about, Luann. A parent is asking, any idea what drove the FAFSA revision? This seems like a disaster. And with 2 kids in college, the idea of not considering multiple kids in college is insane.
So, okay, politics. Pure and simple politics. People complained. My neighbor has 2 kids in college, and they can pay less. They get more money than I do, and my kids are not going to be overlapping in college. And that kind of started that one. But yeah, it's people have been complaining for years that the EFC was horrible. Why can't they change this? They need to get rid of it. And so, they came up with the FAFSA simplification. And so some of it has been beneficial. The whole thing is to try to get aid into the hands of more students that can qualify for it. But my take is all they did is it's a Band-Aid, because all right, somebody qualified for $73.95 in a Pell Grant that couldn't qualify before. But they're applying to their state school that doesn't meet 100% need. They don't have high enough stats to get into maybe the private school, that they're not in the top 20% that they would give them the most, the most aid and grants and whatnot. So there's still going to be a substantial gap that needs to be paid. And how is that going to be addressed? And for many of those lower income families, it's going to be addressed either, okay, I'm going to have to take out loans that I can't afford, or I don't go to college, or I, start off at community college, which I think is a perfectly great way to go for a lot of people. So it was, I guess there was good intentions for some of it, but then for others,
Oops,
just
Lua.
disclose a
Oh, Luann, you're cut out once again.
No.
Can you hear us?
you are living out and you are a farmer. You did not have to disclose your uh, your farm assets. You live on the farm and income from it. Now,
Oh, okay. We can give Luann a few minutes. I'm sure she'll pop back in. What I think she was trying
I'm
to.
back.
Okay, that was fast.
you know, so there have been things that changed that were not for the benefit of most. And you know, why were these things changed? I honestly, I don't know why all of a sudden, you know, small business owners and those that are self-employed. So here's another one. When all of this is supposed to be fair to everybody, well, it's not fair to those that have a SEP or a simple account that they are, you know, have their own qualified retirement accounts as a self-employed business owner. Well, that is on the 1040. And so now their contributions to their SEPs and simples are going to get added to the AGI and increase the AGI. Whereas those that are W-2 employees, it's only taking your 1040 information. It's not asking anymore what was your W-2 on your W-2, what was your qualified 401k contributions and such. So a lot of people say that some of this was make it simpler to have more students that will qualify for grants and aid, and others are saying, well, it's now going to be more fair. You know, life is not fair. Not everybody is going to have the same situation. And there's a whole segment of the population that has now been unfairly, you know, paying more or receiving less aid. So
I mean, my quick take on it is that from just a pure process standpoint, they did want to simplify the process. And if this had worked properly, it would have simplified the process, because you know, there was always confusion about what information should be entered in FAFSA, even though you could have connected it to your you know, IRS account. Now they're just kind of forcing you to make the connection, which is okay. And in the bigger scheme, this should have made it easier for more families, more students to complete the FAFSA. I don't know, you know, if you're kind of following, but a lot of states now are putting in requirements that to graduate, you need to fill out the FAFSA. So there's absolute push that they want more families to fill out the FAFSA, for the basic reason that, like Luann had said, that if the FAFSA can be filled out and you're in the category of family where you'll get any sort of, or be eligible for financial or, you know, aid, particularly from the Pell Grant, they want to make sure you get the Pell Grant money. And the only way you'll get the Pell Grant money is if you fill out the FAFSA. And so that's why there's much more political push to make sure that more students can fill out the FAFSA, because then money isn't going to be left on the table, as I like to say. So that's the good side of why they did this. The not so good, and I wish I was involved in the conversations, I have no idea. There was definitely a shift in kind of who's going to bear the burden of paying for college. Middle class, even upper middle class, have always bared the burden, and unfortunately they're kind of bearing it even more. So there's only a certain amount of money that can go out, and in this index, if you can think of it like that, you're basically being put on a scale, and so you're being, you know, that index is saying, okay, you can afford a certain amount, and then the next guy can afford, you know, a different amount, and so since you can afford more, you're gonna obviously get less aid. So, oops, I don't know how to stop somebody from sharing their screen. Oh, here, let's go to stop.
I went off again.
Um, so that's basically, it's a combination of politics, a combination of truly making it more equitable for, families who weren't getting access to the money, but the end result is that it is not equitable across the board. It made money more accessible to some groups of families, and it hurt other groups of families. And I don't have a good enough reason for why they did that. We all need to pay a little closer attention to who we vote into representing us. That's, kind of the bottom line.
And take a look at your college list. Look at the cost and is this going to be a right fit for you, for your family, for your student? That college list is, that's where it all starts.
Yeah, a phrase we like to say, Luann just said that the college list is where it all starts. I like to say the college list drives everything. It's going to drive your final cost. It's going to drive the amount of work your student, has to do to apply to college. And it's obviously going to drive where your student can end up being accepted and where they ultimately will enroll. So you can't get money from a college you didn't apply to. Your student can't get into a college they didn't apply to. So it all comes down to the schools that are on that list. Okay, hopefully we helped and answered a lot of questions tonight. If there's anything really outstanding that you want to follow up with, you could send an email to support@roadtocollege.com. We'll see, if we can help. And good luck to everybody. Thank you, Luann, as always, a pleasure.
Take care. Yep. Good luck, everyone. And we'll let you know if we hear, when the change is going to go from FAFSA over to the schools.
Yeah, and just so you know, we don't have any special connections to anything or anybody, but we just we're on more mailing lists, we're on more organizations and associations that get that information faster. So if we know it, we will share it. Okay, thanks everyone.
Right,
Bye.
take care. Good night.